My dad sent me $14,000 in allowance over 6 years, but Mom stole every dollar and hid my identity, until the truth forced her to pay it back in shame. The dining room felt unusually quiet that Tuesday evening. The only sounds were the gentle clinking of silverware against our blue ceramic plates and the distant hum of the dishwasher finishing its cycle. Mom had made her famous pot roast, the one that usually filled the house with warmth and comfort. But tonight, even that familiar smell couldn't shake the strange tension I'd been feeling all week. Dad cleared his throat and set down his fork, the way he always did when he was about to say something important. I braced myself for another lecture about college applications or my grades, but instead he asked something completely unexpected. "Sarah, is your allowance enough these days? I know college applications cost money, and with all the fees for SAT prep and everything." The bite of carrots I'd been chewing suddenly felt like cardboard in my mouth. I swallowed hard and stared at him with genuine confusion. What allowance? The reaction was immediate and startling. Dad's hand froze halfway to his mouth, holding a piece of beef that would never complete its journey. His eyes went wide, and for a moment, he looked like someone had just told him the sky was purple. Mom's reaction was even more dramatic. Her fork clattered against her plate so loudly it made me jump. She was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Part shock, part panic, part something else I couldn't quite identify. "What do you mean, what allowance?" Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper, but there was an edge to it that made my stomach clench. I looked between my parents, feeling like I'd somehow said the wrong thing without knowing what the right thing would have been. "I mean, I've never gotten an allowance." "I don't know what you're talking about." The silence that followed stretched on forever. I could hear the grandfather clock in the living room ticking, marking each uncomfortable second. Outside, Mrs. Patterson's dog was barking at something, but inside our dining room, nobody moved. Dad slowly lowered his fork to his plate. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking pale and confused. "Sarah, sweetheart, I've been giving you $200 every month since you turned 12. It comes out of my checking account automatically on the 15th. My heart started beating faster. $200 a month for 6 years? That would be... I tried to do the math in my head, but the numbers seemed impossible. Over $14,000? Dad, I promise you, I've never seen that money. I would definitely remember getting $200 every month. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling slightly as I opened my banking app. Look, here's my account. The only money coming in is my paycheck from Miller's Market. I turned the phone so both my parents could see the screen. There it was, my pathetic checking account balance of $347, with deposits every 2 weeks from my part-time job at the grocery store. No mysterious $200 deposits anywhere. Mom stood up so abruptly that her chair scraped against the hardwood floor with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice was shaky. "Of course you get your allowance. We put it directly into your account every month." "What account?" I asked again, holding up my phone. "This is my only account, and there's no allowance money in it." Dad was already pushing back from the table, his face grim with determination. "I'm getting the bank statements right now. There has to be some mistake." As he headed toward his office, I caught Mom's eye across the table. She was still standing, gripping the back of her chair so tightly her knuckles had turned white. There was something in her expression that I'd never seen before, a kind of desperate fear that made my chest tight with anxiety. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked softly. She sat back down heavily, like her legs couldn't support her anymore. "I'm sure it's just a banking error," she said. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, she started fidgeting with her napkin, folding it into smaller and smaller squares, then unfolding it and starting over. The 10 minutes Dad was gone felt like 10 hours. I tried to eat more of my dinner, but everything tasted like dust. Mom hadn't touched her food since Dad left the table. She just kept folding and unfolding that napkin, staring at it like it held the answers to life's greatest mysteries. When I heard Dad's footsteps coming back down the hallway, my stomach dropped. Something about the heaviness of his walk told me this wasn't going to be good news. He appeared in the doorway holding a thick stack of papers, his face set in lines I'd rarely seen. Without a word, he walked back to the table and started pushing aside our plates, making room for the documents. "Here it is," he said, his voice flat and tired. $200, transferred on the 15th of every month for the past 6 years. He spread the bank statements across our dinner table like he was laying out evidence in a courtroom. Every single month, without fail. I leaned over to look at the papers, my heart pounding so hard I was sure my parents could hear it. There they were, dozens and dozens of transfers, all labeled Sarah allowance. The amounts were exactly what Dad had said, $200, every month, going back years. But something was wrong. Dad, I said, pointing to the account number at the bottom of each transfer receipt. This isn't my account number. He looked where I was pointing, then at my phone screen showing my banking app, then back at the papers. I watched the color drain from his face completely. Then whose account is this? He asked, his voice barely audible. The question hung in the air between us like a physical presence. I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. If the money wasn't going to me, and it wasn't going to some random stranger, then where had $14,000 gone over the past 6 years? I looked at Mom, hoping she might have some explanation, some reasonable answer that would make this all make sense. But she was staring at the bank statements with an expression that looked almost like guilt. Mom? I said. Do you know anything about this? She opened her mouth like she was going to speak, then closed it again. Her hands were trembling now, and the napkin she'd been folding was completely shredded. There has to be a logical explanation, Dad said, but he didn't sound convinced. I'll call the bank first thing tomorrow morning. This has to be some kind of error. But even as he said it, I could see in his eyes that he was starting to suspect it wasn't an error at all. We sat in terrible silence for the rest of dinner, though none of us ate much. The pot roast that had smelled so good an hour earlier now seemed cold and unappetizing. Every few minutes Dad would pick up one of the bank statements and stare at it, like he was hoping the account number would magically change to match mine. Mom excused herself early, claiming she had a headache. As she left the dining room, she paused in the doorway and looked back at us with an expression I couldn't read. I'm sure everything will make sense tomorrow, she said, but her voice sounded hollow. After she was gone, Dad and I sat at the table surrounded by the evidence of 6 years of mysterious transfers. The numbers on the pages seemed to mock us, raising questions neither of us was ready to answer. Dad, I said finally, what if it's not a mistake? He looked up from the papers, and I saw something in his eyes that scared me. The beginning of doubt about someone he'd trusted completely for 20 years. Let's wait and see what the bank says tomorrow, he said, but his voice was heavy with the same fear that was growing in my chest. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with possibilities. Where had my allowance money been going for 6 years? Who had access to create an account that wasn't mine? And why did Mom look so scared when we found out about it? The answers, I was beginning to suspect, were going to change everything. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Dad's voice echoing from the kitchen. Even from upstairs, I could hear the frustration in his tone as he spoke to someone on the phone. I checked my clock, 7:30 a.m. He must have called the bank the moment they opened. I threw on my robe and padded downstairs, following the sound of his increasingly agitated voice. Mom was standing at the kitchen counter, still in her pajamas, clutching a coffee mug like it was a lifeline. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually perfect hair was disheveled. No, I need to speak to someone who can tell me about this account, Dad was saying into the phone. I've been transferred 4 times already. Yes, I'll hold again. But this is ridiculous. He caught sight of me in the doorway and gave me a tired smile that didn't reach his eyes. The phone was pressed against his ear, and I could hear the tinny sound of hold music playing. How long have you been on the phone? I asked. Since 7, he said. I've talked to 3 different people, and they keep transferring me to someone else. Apparently the account information is restricted and requires a supervisor. Mom turned around at the sound of my voice, and I was shocked by how pale she looked. Her hands were shaking slightly as she raised the coffee mug to her lips. Morning, sweetheart, she said, but her voice sounded strained and artificial. Did you sleep okay? Before I could answer, Dad's attention snapped back to the phone. Yes, I'm still here. Patricia. Thank you for taking my call. I need information about account transfers that have been going out of my checking account for the past 6 years. I moved closer, trying to hear both sides of the conversation. Dad had put the phone on speaker without realizing it, and Patricia's professional voice filled our kitchen. I can see the transfers you're referring to, Mr. Bell. They're going to an account under the name Sarah Morrison Chen. Is that your daughter? The coffee mug slipped from Mom's hands and crashed to the kitchen floor, sending ceramic shards and hot coffee everywhere. But she didn't move to clean it up. She just stood there, staring at the mess at her feet like she was seeing something else entirely. Could you repeat that name? Dad asked, his voice very careful and controlled. Sarah Morrison Chen, Patricia said clearly. The account was opened in 2018, and it's been receiving monthly transfers from your account since then. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. But that's not my name, I said, loud enough for Patricia to hear through the phone. My name is Sarah Morrison Bell. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Is this Sarah? Patricia asked. Yes, but my last name is Bell, not Chen. I've never heard of any account under the name Chen. That's unusual, Patricia said. Mr. Bell, do you have any family members named Chen who might have access to your daughter's information? Dad looked at Mom, who was still standing frozen among the broken coffee mug pieces. Coffee was soaking into her slippers, but she didn't seem to notice. No, Dad said slowly. We don't know anyone named Chen. He paused, then asked the question I could see forming in his eyes. Patricia, can you tell me who opened that account? Another pause. According to our records, the account was opened by Donna Morrison, using Sarah Morrison Chen's information. She's listed as the account holder's guardian. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad stared at Mom with an expression of complete bewilderment. I felt like I was watching a movie where someone had suddenly started speaking a different language. Donna, Dad said quietly. What is she talking about? Mom finally looked up from the broken mug. Her face was paper white, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I can explain, she whispered. Then please do, Dad said, but his voice had gone cold in a way I'd never heard before. Instead of explaining, Mom looked at me with an expression of pure panic, then at Dad, then back at me. I need some air, she said suddenly. Mom, wait! I started, but she was already moving toward the back door. Donna, you can't just leave, Dad called after her. We need to talk about this. But she was gone, disappearing through the back door and into our garden. Through the kitchen window, I could see her walking quickly toward the gate that led to the street, her pajamas bright against the morning sunlight. Dad ended the call with Patricia after getting the account details, promising to come into the bank later that day. We stood in the coffee-stained kitchen, surrounded by broken ceramic and unanswered questions. Dad, I said slowly, why would Mom open a bank account using a different last name for me? He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized as his way of dealing with stress. I have absolutely no idea, Sarah. This doesn't make any sense. We spent the next 20 minutes cleaning up the broken mug and mopping coffee off the kitchen floor. Neither of us spoke much, but I could practically hear the wheels turning in Dad's head. Every few minutes he'd stop what he was doing and stare out the window, like he was hoping Mom would come back and explain everything. It was Dad who noticed that Mom had left her purse behind. The brown leather bag she carried everywhere was sitting on the kitchen counter, right where she'd dropped it when she grabbed her coffee that morning. Should we? I started, then trailed off. Looking through someone's purse felt like a violation of privacy. I don't know, Dad said, staring at the bag like it might bite him. But Sarah, your mother just ran out of here after we discovered she's been operating a secret bank account in your name. I think we're past worrying about privacy. As if to make the decision for us, the purse tipped over, and contents spilled across the counter. Wallet, keys, lipstick, breath mints, all the usual stuff. But there was also a manila envelope that looked official and important. And written across the front in Mom's handwriting was, Sarah Morrison Chen. Dad and I looked at each other. I think we have to look now, he said quietly. Inside the envelope were documents I'd never seen before. The first was a birth certificate, but not the one I knew about. This one had my name listed as Sarah Morrison Chen, and my mother listed as Amy Chen. The father was listed as unknown. Dad, I whispered. This says Amy Chen is my mother. His hands were shaking as he took the birth certificate from me. That can't be right. You're Donna's daughter. I was there when you were born. But as we looked through more documents, a different story began to emerge. Adoption papers dated when I was 3 months old. Foster care records showing I'd spent the first 90 days of my life in the system. Hospital records from a birth that had happened not at General Hospital like Mom had always told me, but at St. Mary's across town. And at the bottom of the stack, a photograph that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a picture of a baby who looked remarkably like my own baby photos, being held by a young Asian woman I'd never seen before. On the back of the photo, someone had written in careful script, Sarah's first mother. Goodbye for now. Oh my God, I said, sinking into one of the kitchen chairs. I'm adopted. Dad sat down across from me, still holding the birth certificate. His face had gone through about a dozen different expressions in the past few minutes. Confusion, shock, understanding, and now something that looked like grief. According to these papers, he said slowly, your biological mother's name is Amy Chen. You were born at St. Mary's Hospital on March 15th, not March 20th like we've always celebrated your birthday. My birthday is wrong too? I felt like everything I'd ever known about myself was crumbling. Dad kept reading through the documents. It says here you spent 3 months in foster care before the adoption was finalized. Sarah, according to this, I'm not listed as your biological father either. I stared at him, feeling panic rise in my chest. But you are my dad, right? I mean, you're still my dad. Of course I'm your dad, he said firmly, reaching across the table to take my hand. I've been your father for 18 years. Biology doesn't change that, but Sarah. He paused, looking at the papers again. I think your mother and I need to have a very serious conversation about why she never told us you were adopted. At the very bottom of the envelope was a letter that looked much more recent than the other documents. It was written on plain white paper and dated just 2 months ago. Dear Sarah, it began, and I felt my heart start racing again. I hope this letter finds you well and happy. I know it's been 18 years since I made the hardest decision of my life, but not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you. I had to stop reading and take a deep breath. Dad was watching me with concern. You okay? He asked. This is from Amy Chen, I said. My biological mother. I continued reading. I've been sending money every month since you turned 12, hoping it helps with your education and the things you need. I know $200 isn't much, but I work 2 jobs now and it's the best I can do. I just want to contribute something to your life, even from far away. Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She's been sending the money. The $200 every month. That's where it's been coming from. His face went very still as the implications sank in. You mean the money I've been transferring? It wasn't my money going to you. It was her money, and I was just passing it along? But it wasn't getting to me, I said. It was going to that account Mom opened. We looked at each other across the kitchen table and I could see the same terrible realization forming in both our minds. The letter continued. I hope someday we can meet. I hope you understand why I had to give you up. I was 17 and scared, but I've never stopped loving you. I write to you every week, but I was told you don't want contact with me. Still, I hope that might change someday. All my love, Amy Chen. I read the last part twice, feeling sick to my stomach. Dad, she says she was told I don't want contact with her. Who would tell her that? He asked, but I could see in his eyes that we both knew the answer. When Mom came back 3 hours later, Dad and I were still sitting at the kitchen table. All the documents were spread out in front of us like evidence in a trial. She took one look at the papers and sank into a chair like all the strength had gone out of her legs. I can explain, she said for the 3rd time in 24 hours. Please do, Dad said. His voice was calm, but I could hear years of trust cracking underneath it. Mom's hands were shaking as she reached for Amy Chen's letter. She read it slowly, her lips moving slightly with each word, and I watched her face crumble with what looked like shame and regret. I was going to tell you, she said finally, her voice barely audible. When you turned 18, I was going to explain everything. Explain what? I demanded. The anger that had been building in my chest for hours was finally spilling over. That I'm adopted? That you've been lying to me my entire life? That my real mother has been trying to contact me and you've been blocking her? I'm your real mother. The words exploded out of her with surprising force. I'm the one who stayed up all night when you had pneumonia when you were 4. I'm the one who taught you to ride a bike and helped you with your homework and worried about you every single day for 18 years. And you're also the one who stole money from my birth mother, I shot back. Money she was sending to help take care of me. Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. I didn't steal anything. I used that money for family expenses. The kitchen renovation, your father's car repair when it broke down, your college savings account. My college savings account has $3,000 in it, I interrupted. If you'd been putting Amy's money in there for 6 years, it would have $14,000. Dad had been silent through this exchange, but now he spoke up. His voice deadly quiet. Donna. Where did the money go? She couldn't meet his eyes. I told you. Family expenses. The house, the car, your business loan last year when things got tight. You used money meant for Sarah to pay for my business loan? Dad's voice was getting louder. Without telling me where it was coming from? I was trying to keep our family together. Mom's composure was completely gone now. She was crying openly, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Do you know what it's like to live with the fear that your daughter might be taken away from you? That her birth mother might come back and want her? Nobody was going to take me away, I said, but even as I said it, I wasn't sure that was true. Would I have wanted to know Amy Chen when I was 12? Would I have wanted a relationship with her? You don't know that, Mom said desperately. She was sending money, writing letters, asking to meet you. What if you had decided you wanted to live with her instead? So you decided to make that choice for me? The betrayal felt like a physical weight in my chest. You decided to keep me from knowing I had a biological mother who wanted to be part of my life? Dad was staring at Mom like he'd never seen her before. Donna, how long have you known she was adopted? Since the beginning, Mom whispered. Since before we got married. The silence that followed was devastating. I could see Dad processing this information, realizing that their entire 20-year marriage had been built on a fundamental lie. You've been lying to me for 20 years, he said slowly. I wasn't lying, I didn't tell you everything. What else? His voice was flat now, emotionless. What else haven't you told me? Mom looked trapped, like a deer in headlights. There might be other things. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I can't do this right now. I need to call Amy. Sarah, please don't, Mom said, reaching for my arm. Let me explain everything first. I pulled away from her. You've had 18 years to explain. I think Amy Chen deserves to know that I just found out I exist. Amy Chen answered her phone on the third ring. Her voice was soft and warm when she said hello, with just a trace of an accent I couldn't place. Is this Amy Chen? I asked, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it through the phone. Yes. Who is this? I took a deep breath. This is Sarah. Sarah Morrison Chen, I guess. The silence that followed stretched so long, I thought the call might have dropped. Then, Sarah? My Sarah? I think so. I found your letter today. She started crying then, and so did I. We were both sobbing into our phones like teenagers, which, I guess I still was. It took several minutes before either of us could speak coherently. I can't believe it's really you, she said through her tears. I've been waiting for this call for 6 years. I just found out today that I was adopted, I told her. I had no idea you existed until this morning. What? Her voice changed, becoming sharp with confusion. But I've been writing to you through your adoptive mother. She said you didn't want direct contact, but that you were doing well. I never got any letters, I said. And I never got the money you were sending either. There was another long pause. When Amy spoke again, her voice was cold with understanding. She intercepted everything. It looks that way. We talked for 2 hours that first phone call. Amy told me about my grandparents, who had died when I was 10 and 15, deaths I'd never known about because I'd never known they existed. She told me about my half-brother Kevin, who was 15 now and had been asking about his sister for years. She told me about the 2 jobs she worked, cleaning offices at night and working at a daycare during the day, and how she'd been saving every extra penny to send to me. I kept a shoebox full of things I wanted to give you, she said. Birthday presents, Christmas gifts, letters I wrote but was told I couldn't send. I kept thinking someday. I want to meet you, I said impulsively. Are you sure? I don't want to cause problems with your family. I looked through the kitchen doorway, where I could see Mom and Dad having what looked like the most serious conversation of their marriage. I think my family already has problems. We agreed to meet the following Saturday at a coffee shop called Sunrise Cafe downtown. It was neutral territory, public enough to feel safe but quiet enough to talk. Sarah, Amy said before we hung up, I want you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone I missed, I thought about what you might be doing, who you were becoming. I wish I had known about you sooner, I said, and I meant it. After I hung up, I sat in my room for a long time, staring at the adoption papers and trying to process everything I'd learned. My entire identity had shifted in the space of a single day. I wasn't who I'd thought I was. My birthday was wrong, my medical history was a mystery, and I had a biological family I'd never known about. But more than that, I felt angry. Angry at Mom for lying. Angry at the system that had allowed this to happen. Angry at myself for never questioning the gaps in my early childhood memories. When I finally went downstairs for dinner, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Dad had made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, comfort food, but none of us were eating much. "How did it go?" Mom asked quietly. "With your phone call?" "Her name is Amy," I said, "and I'm meeting her on Saturday." Mom's face went pale. "Sarah, please think about this. You don't know anything about her. She could be..." "She could be what?" I interrupted. "A loving mother who's been trying to be part of my life for 18 years while you blocked her at every turn." "She gave you up," Mom said desperately. "She didn't want you." "She was 17, I said. "And according to these documents, she was pressured into the adoption by social services and by you." Dad looked up from his untouched soup. "What do you mean pressured?" I pulled out another document I'd found in the envelope. One we hadn't discussed yet. "There are notes here from the social worker. Amy wanted to keep me, but she was told she was too young, too poor, too unstable. And there are records of meetings between the social worker and Mom, where Mom apparently convinced them that Amy would be an unfit mother." "That's not..." Mom started. "It's right here in black and white," I said, holding up the papers. "You actively worked to make sure Amy couldn't keep me. And then you made sure she couldn't contact me afterward." The look Dad gave Mom was unlike anything I'd ever seen pass between them. It was pure disappointment, mixed with a kind of grief that made my chest ache. "Donna," he said quietly, "tell me you didn't manipulate a 17-year-old girl into giving up her baby." "I was protecting Sarah," Mom said, but her voice was weak. "I was giving her a stable home, good parents." "You were stealing her," I said. "And then you stole money from her biological mother for 6 years." Mom started crying again, but this time it felt manipulative rather than genuine. "Everything I did out of love. I love you, Sarah. You're my daughter." "Love doesn't lie," I said, standing up from the table. "Love doesn't steal. And love doesn't keep a child from knowing where she came from." I left them sitting at the dinner table and went to my room to research Amy Chen online. It didn't take long to find her. She had a small social media presence, mostly pictures of a teenage boy who looked remarkably like me, and posts about her work at the daycare. She looked tired in most of the photos, but happy. There were several pictures of her at what looked like school events for my half-brother, and one photo from last Christmas where she was wearing a t-shirt that said, "World's Best Mom," that Kevin had apparently given her. She looked like someone who had worked hard for everything she had. Someone who had made sacrifices. Someone who had never stopped hoping to see her daughter again. That night, I lay in bed thinking about nature versus nurture, about the family who had raised me and the family I'd never known I had. Mom was right about one thing. She had been there for all the important moments of my childhood. But she'd also stolen those same moments from Amy, who had been working 2 jobs and saving money and writing letters to a daughter who never knew she existed. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just at the deception, but at the arrogance of it. Mom had decided she knew what was best for everyone, for me, for Amy, for Dad. She'd made choices that affected all our lives without consulting any of us. But Saturday was still 5 days away, and I had to figure out how to get through those days living in a house where every conversation felt like stepping through a minefield. Part 4. The rest of the week passed in a strange, tense fog. Dad had moved into the guest bedroom, and the silence between my parents was deafening. I caught them having hushed, intense conversations that stopped the moment I walked into a room. Mom kept trying to corner me alone, wanting to explain her side of things, but I wasn't ready to hear it. On Thursday evening, she knocked on my bedroom door while I was doing homework. "Sarah? Can we talk?" I didn't look up from my calculus problems. "I don't think there's anything to talk about." "Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the edge of my bed, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "I know you're angry," she began. "Angry doesn't begin to cover it. I need you to understand why I did what I did." Her voice was pleading. "When we adopted you, you were so tiny, So perfect. You'd been in foster care for 3 months, and you were underweight and behind on all your developmental milestones. The foster family said you cried constantly. Despite myself, I was listening. When we brought you home, you were so sick. You had an ear infection and a respiratory infection, and you wouldn't eat. I spent weeks nursing you back to health, staying up all night, taking you to doctor appointments. You were my baby, Sarah. Not biologically, but in every way that mattered. That doesn't excuse what you did to Amy, I said quietly. Mom's face crumpled. When Amy started sending money and letters, I panicked. I thought she was trying to take you back. I thought she was going to disrupt our family. So you decided to disrupt hers instead? I thought I was protecting you. The words came out as almost a wail. You were happy, Sarah. You were thriving. You had friends and good grades and a stable home. Why would I risk all of that for someone who gave you up? Because she's my mother too, I said, and the words felt strange in my mouth. I'm your mother, Mom said fiercely. I'm the one who was here. I'm the one who... I know what you did for me, I interrupted. But that doesn't erase what you kept from me. And it doesn't excuse stealing money from someone who was working 2 jobs to try to help her daughter. Mom was quiet for a long moment. What can I do to fix this? I don't know if you can fix it, I said honestly. But you could start by telling me the whole truth. All of it. She took a shaky breath. There are things that might hurt you to know. I think I'm past worrying about being hurt by the truth. So she told me. About how Amy had been homeless for part of her pregnancy, staying in shelters and with friends. About how she'd begged to keep me, promising to get a job and an apartment. But the social workers had convinced her she couldn't provide a stable home. About how Mom had presented herself as the perfect alternative. Married, financially stable, desperate for a child after years of infertility. I wasn't lying about wanting you, Mom said. We'd been trying to have a baby for 8 years. When they told us about you, it felt like a miracle. But you made sure Amy couldn't change her mind. Mom nodded miserably. I was afraid she would. Even after the adoption was finalized, I was afraid. And when she started trying to contact you, I thought if you knew about her, you might choose her over us. So you chose for me. Yes. And I know that was wrong now. But Sarah, I was so scared of losing you. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. But it didn't change what she'd done. If anything, understanding her motivations made it worse, because it showed how calculated her deception had been. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I changed clothes 3 times, unsure what you wear to meet the mother who gave birth to you, but never got to raise you. Finally, I settled on jeans and a sweater. Casual but nice, the kind of outfit that said I was taking this seriously without trying too hard. Dad offered to drive me to Sunrise Cafe, but I wanted to take the bus. I needed the time to think, to prepare myself for whatever this meeting might bring. Are you sure you don't want me to come with you? He asked as I grabbed my jacket. I need to do this alone, I said. Mom appeared in the hallway as I was heading for the door. Sarah, wait. I turned around, expecting another plea to reconsider. If you decide you want to have a relationship with her, I understand, she said quietly. I won't try to stop you. It was the first time since this whole mess started that she'd put my needs ahead of her own fears. Sunrise Cafe was busy for a Saturday morning, filled with the usual mix of college students studying and families having weekend breakfast. I arrived 15 minutes early and claimed a table in the corner, ordering a coffee I didn't really want just to have something to do with my hands. I spotted Amy the moment she walked through the door. It was like looking at a version of myself in 20 years. Same dark hair, same nose, same way of scanning the room nervously before making eye contact. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'3", and prettier than her Facebook photos had shown. When she saw me, her face lit up with a smile so bright it took my breath away. We stared at each other for a moment across the busy cafe, and I felt 18 years of questions and longing pass between us in that single look. Sarah, she said softly as she approached my table. Hi, I said, standing up awkwardly. Amy? And then we were hugging, and she was crying, and I was crying, and half the cafe was probably staring at us, but I didn't care. She smelled like vanilla and something floral, and her hug felt like safety in a way that was both foreign and familiar. You're so beautiful, she whispered into my hair. You're so much more beautiful than I even imagined. When we finally sat down, Amy couldn't stop looking at me, like she was afraid I might disappear. I've dreamed about this moment for 18 years, she said. But now that it's happening, I don't know what to say. Tell me about yourself, I said. Tell me about our family. Her face lit up again. Our family. I like the sound of that. She told me about my grandparents, both gone now but full of life when they were alive. My grandmother had been a seamstress who made beautiful quilts, and my grandfather had run a small restaurant in Chinatown. They'd immigrated from Taiwan in the 1960s, bringing recipes and traditions that Amy had tried to preserve. They were so excited when I was pregnant with you, she said. My mother started knitting baby blankets the day I told her. When I had to give you up, it broke their hearts. They asked about you every week until they died. She showed me pictures on her phone, grandparents I'd never met, holding baby blankets meant for me. Family gatherings where there was always an empty space, always someone missing. And Kevin, she said, pulling up photos of my half-brother. He's been asking about his sister since he was old enough to understand what that meant. He was so angry when he found out I'd been sending you money and letters and never getting responses. He thought you hated us. I didn't even know you existed, I said, still struggling with that reality. Amy's face darkened. I should have fought harder. I should have insisted on direct contact instead of going through Donna. Tell me about that, I said. How did the adoption happen? Amy's story was different from what Mom had told me, but the details filled in gaps I'd never known existed. She'd been 17, living with her boyfriend who'd abandoned her when she got pregnant. She'd been working at a fast food restaurant, trying to save money for an apartment, when she'd gone into premature labor. You were born 6 weeks early, she said. Tiny and perfect, but you had to stay in the hospital for 2 weeks. I spent every day there, holding you, feeding you, falling in love with you. But you couldn't keep me. The social worker said I couldn't provide a stable home. I was living in a women's shelter at the time, and I didn't have health insurance or a high school diploma. She wiped tears from her eyes. Donna and your father seemed like a miracle. Married, financially stable, desperate for a child. The social worker said it would be selfish to keep you when I could give you so much more by letting them adopt you. Did you want to keep me? More than anything in the world, she said without hesitation. But I also wanted what was best for you. And at the time, I thought that was them. She told me about the years after the adoption, how she'd finished high school and gotten a job at the daycare where she still worked. How she'd met Kevin's father when Kevin was 2. And how they'd lived together for several years before he'd died in a car accident when Kevin was 8. I never stopped thinking about you, she said. Every milestone Kevin hit, I wondered if you were hitting them too. When he started kindergarten, I wondered what your first day of school was like. When he learned to ride a bike, I wondered if you were learning too. I was, I said softly. Mom taught me in our driveway when I was 6. Amy smiled through her tears. Good. I'm glad she was there for those moments. It was a generous thing to say, given everything Mom had done. We talked for 4 hours that first meeting. Amy told me about my heritage, about traditions and foods and stories I'd never heard. She showed me pictures of relatives who had my hands, my stubbornness, my laugh. She told me about Kevin's excitement when she'd called to tell him she was finally going to meet me. He wants to meet you too, she said. But I told him we should take things slow. I don't want to overwhelm you. I'd like to meet him, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. When it was finally time to leave, Amy walked me to the bus stop. Can we do this again? She asked. Can I see you again? I'd like that, I said. She hugged me goodbye, and I could feel her reluctance to let me go. Sarah, she said. I need you to know something. Whatever relationship we have going forward, whatever you decide you want this to be, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for today, for getting to see the amazing person you've become, for knowing you're okay. On the bus ride home, I thought about the 2 women who both called themselves my mother. Mom, who had raised me and loved me and also lied to me for 18 years. Amy, who had given birth to me and never stopped loving me from a distance, working 2 jobs to send money to a daughter she wasn't allowed to contact. I didn't know how to reconcile these 2 versions of motherhood, or how to build a relationship with Amy without hurting Mom, or how to forgive Mom without betraying Amy. All I knew was that my life had become infinitely more complicated, but also infinitely richer. I had a brother I'd never met, grandparents I'd never known, a whole heritage and history that had been kept from me. and I had choices to make about what kind of family I wanted to build going forward. When I got home from meeting Amy, I found Dad sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a grim expression. Mom was nowhere to be seen. "How did it go?" he asked. "Good," I said, then corrected myself. "Actually, it was incredible. She's really nice, Dad, and I have a half-brother named Kevin who's 15. Dad nodded slowly. "I'm glad it went well. You deserve to know your biological family." "Where's Mom?" "Upstairs. She's been crying most of the day." He rubbed his temples like he had a headache. "Sarah, we need to talk about what happens next." I sat down across from him, suddenly feeling exhausted. "What do you mean?" "I mean, your mother and I are having serious problems. This isn't just about the money or even about hiding the adoption. It's about 18 years of lies, and I don't know how to get past that." The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket. "Are you getting divorced?" "I don't know yet. But I've asked your mother to stay at her sister's place for a while. We both need some space to think." I felt a stab of panic. Despite everything Mom had done, the thought of our family completely falling apart was terrifying. "Dad, I don't want to be the reason you guys split up." "You're not the reason," he said firmly. "The lies are the reason. The deception is the reason. Sarah, if your mother could hide something this big for this long, what else has she hidden? How do I trust her again?" I didn't have an answer for that. Over the next few weeks, a new routine developed. Mom stayed at Aunt Linda's house across town, coming by occasionally to pick up clothes or have awkward conversations with me. Dad and I learned to cook together, badly, and the house felt both more peaceful and more empty. Amy and I started meeting regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for lunch. Sometimes she'd pick me up after school and we'd go for walks in the park. She told me stories about my grandparents, taught me a few words in Mandarin, and showed me pictures of relatives I looked like. The most emotional meeting happened 3 weeks after we first met, when Amy brought a shoebox to our coffee date. "I told you I saved things for you," she said, setting the worn cardboard box on the table between us. "Birthday presents, Christmas gifts, letters I wrote but couldn't send. I know you're too old for some of this stuff now, but..." Inside the box were 18 years of love. Baby toys I'd never played with. A stuffed elephant meant for my first birthday. School supplies for a first day of kindergarten I'd spent with different parents. A pink bicycle helmet for the bike rides I'd taken with Mom instead of her. Jewelry for Sweet 16 and graduation milestones that had come and gone without her. But it was the letters that broke my heart. Hundreds of them, written on different kinds of paper over the years. Some were typed, some handwritten, some obviously written late at night when Amy couldn't sleep for missing me. I read them in chronological order, watching myself grow up through Amy's imagination. Letters to a 2-year-old about starting to walk and talk. Letters to a 5-year-old starting kindergarten. Letters to a 10-year-old losing her first tooth. Letters to a 16-year-old learning to drive. "Happy sweet 16, my beautiful daughter," one letter read. "I hope someone is throwing you a party today. I hope you're wearing something that makes you feel pretty. I hope you know that somewhere across town your first mother is thinking about you and wishing you joy." I had to stop reading because I was crying too hard to see the words. "I'm sorry," Amy said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I didn't mean to upset you." "I'm not upset," I said through my tears. "I'm grateful. These are beautiful." She smiled, crying a little herself. "I used to imagine giving them to you on your 18th birthday. I thought maybe by then, you'd want to meet me." "I would have," I said. "I would have wanted to meet you years ago if I'd known." That night, I called Amy from my room to ask her about the bank account Mom had set up. "I reported it to the bank as fraud," Amy said. "They're investigating, and I'll probably get some of the money back. But honestly, Sarah, I don't care about the money. I care about the fact that for 6 years, I thought you were getting help with school and college expenses, and you weren't." "How much money was it total?" I asked. "About $14,000 over 6 years. I know that's not a fortune, but it was everything I could spare. I worked extra shifts, took on additional cleaning jobs, gave up vacations and new clothes. I wanted to make sure you had opportunities I couldn't give you when you were little." The guilt was crushing. While Amy had been sacrificing to send me money, I'd been working part-time at a grocery store to buy my own school supplies and save for college. "Amy, I'm so sorry. If I had known..." "Stop," she said gently. "This isn't your fault. You were a child. Donna was the adult who made these choices." A few days later, Mom called and asked if she could take me to dinner. Dad said it was my choice, so I agreed. We went to our old favorite restaurant, the Italian place where we'd celebrated every birthday and achievement for years. "You look good," Mom said as we waited for our food. "Happy?" "I am, I think. Confused. But happy." "I'm glad you're getting to know Amy." "I really am." I studied her face, looking for signs of insincerity, but she seemed to mean it. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she continued. "About love not lying. You were right." "Mom." "No, let me finish. I convinced myself that I was protecting you, but I was really protecting myself. I was terrified that if you knew about Amy, you'd choose her over me." "It wouldn't have been about choosing," I said. "It would have been about having both of you. I see that now. And I see how selfish I was. Keeping you from knowing your heritage, your biological family, your brother." She wiped her eyes with her napkin. "I'm seeing a therapist now. Someone who specializes in adoptive families. That's good. She's helping me understand that loving you means wanting what's best for you, even if that's hard for me. And what's best for you is knowing the truth about where you came from." Our food arrived, but neither of us ate much. We were too busy talking, really talking, for the first time in months. "The money," Mom said eventually. "I know what I did was wrong. I've been meeting with a lawyer about paying restitution to Amy. She's already reported it to the bank as fraud." Mom nodded. "I know. I deserve whatever consequences come from that." "Why did you do it, really?" "Not the surface reasons about protecting our family. Why did you take money from someone who was trying to help her daughter?" Mom was quiet for a long time. "Because I was jealous," she said finally. "Jealous that she could have children naturally when I couldn't. Jealous that you were biologically hers when you weren't biologically mine. Jealous that even after giving you up, she got to be the good mother who sacrificed for you, while I was just the woman who happened to be there." It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. "But you were there," I said softly. "You were there for everything. That matters too." "Does it? After everything I've done?" I thought about Amy's letters, about all the milestones she'd missed and imagined from afar. I thought about Mom's presence at every soccer game, every school play, every midnight fever and homework crisis. "Yes," I said. "It matters. You're both my mother, Mom. In different ways." She started crying again, but this time it seemed like relief, rather than desperation. "I don't deserve forgiveness," she said. "Maybe not," I said. "But I'm going to forgive you anyway, because holding on to anger is exhausting. But things can't go back to the way they were. I'm going to have a relationship with Amy and Kevin, and you're going to have to be okay with that." "I will be. I promise." The following Saturday, Amy brought Kevin to meet me. He was taller than I'd expected, already almost 6 feet at 15, but he had Amy's eyes and my stubborn chin. He was shy at first, hanging back while Amy and I hugged, but when Amy introduced us, his face broke into a grin that was pure sunshine. "I can't believe you're real," he said. "I mean, I knew you were real, but you're actually here." "I can't believe you're real either," I said, and meant it. We spent the afternoon at the park, and Kevin told me about school, his friends, his plan to try out for varsity basketball next year. He showed me pictures on his phone of his latest art projects. He was incredibly talented, much better than I'd ever been at drawing. "Mom talks about you all the time," he said as we walked around the duck pond. "She has this whole scrapbook of newspaper clippings about your school, your honor roll announcements, anything she could find. It's kind of creepy, but also really sweet." "She made a scrapbook about me?" "Oh yeah. She shows it to everyone." "This is my daughter Sarah," he said, mimicking Amy's voice. "She's on the honor roll and she works at a grocery store and she's so responsible." The thought of Amy following my achievements from a distance, proud of a daughter she couldn't contact, made my chest ache with a mixture of love and sadness. "Kevin," I said, "I'm sorry I wasn't around when you were little. I'm sorry you grew up without a sister." He shrugged, but I could see the emotion in his eyes. "Wasn't your fault, but I'm glad we found each other now." "Me too." That evening, Amy drove me home and walked me to the door. Dad answered when she knocked, and I watched them meet for the first time. "You must be David," Amy said, extending her hand. "Thank you for taking such good care of our daughter." "She's an amazing kid," Dad said. "You should be proud." "I am. And I'm grateful to you and Donna for giving her opportunities I couldn't." It was a generous thing to say, and I could see Dad relax slightly. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" he asked. "I should get Kevin home, but maybe another time." As Amy got back in her car, Dad put his arm around my shoulders. "She seems like good people," he said. "She is. You're lucky, Sarah. Not many people get to have two families who love them." The bank investigation took 3 months to resolve. In the end, Mom had to pay back $12,000 of the $14,000 Amy had sent over the years. The remaining $2,000 was considered processing fees and interest that couldn't be recovered. Mom took out a second mortgage on the house to pay the restitution, which became another point of contention between my parents. She destroyed our financial security to cover up a lie, Dad told me one evening as we made dinner together. "I don't know how to come back from that." But despite his anger, I could see Dad struggling with the decision about their marriage. They'd been together for 20 years, and until this revelation, they'd been genuinely happy. Mom was going to therapy twice a week and had started attending a support group for adoptive parents. She was trying to change, but whether it was too little too late remained to be seen. The hardest part was watching them try to figure out how to coexist during my senior year. Mom had moved back into the house but was sleeping in the guest room. They were polite to each other, but the easy intimacy they'd shared my entire life was gone. Dinners were stilted affairs where we talked about safe topics like school and the weather, avoiding the landmines of trust and forgiveness. Amy, meanwhile, had become a steady presence in my life. We met for lunch every Tuesday after school, and she started coming to some of my soccer games. The first time she showed up on the sidelines, Mom was already there, and I held my breath waiting to see what would happen. They sat on opposite sides of the field and didn't speak, but they both cheered when I scored a goal. It wasn't friendship, but it wasn't war either. Progress, I told myself. Kevin started hanging out with us more too. He was funny and easy to be around, and I found myself looking forward to the brother relationship I'd never had. He taught me to play video games I'd never been interested in before, and I helped him with his college application essays. It felt natural in a way that surprised me. "It's weird," I told Amy one Tuesday over lunch. "I spent my whole life being an only child, and now I can't imagine not having Kevin as a brother." "You two are more alike than you know," Amy said, smiling. "Same stubborn streak, same sense of humor, same way of tilting your head when you're thinking hard about something." "Is it weird for you? Having both of us together after all these years?" Amy considered the question seriously. "It's wonderful and heartbreaking at the same time. Wonderful because I get to see you interact with your brother, heartbreaking because I realize how much I missed. All the sibling fights and inside jokes and shared experiences that make you two who you are." "We can make new shared experiences," I said. "We can. And we are." One of those new experiences was Amy teaching me to cook traditional Chinese dishes. Every Sunday, I'd go to her apartment and we'd spend hours in her tiny kitchen, learning recipes that had been passed down from my grandmother. The first time I successfully made dumplings without them falling apart, Amy cried with pride. "Your grandmother would have loved teaching you this," she said, wiping her eyes. "She always said food was how we show love in our family." I was learning so much about my heritage that I'd never known. About the Mid-Autumn Festival and the significance of red envelopes at New Year. About my great-grandfather who had been a scholar in Taiwan, and my great-grandmother, who had been known for her incredible embroidery. About family traditions and cultural values that felt both foreign and familiar. "I wish I had learned this stuff when I was little," I said one Sunday as we made spring rolls together. "You're learning it now," Amy said. "That's what matters." But it was Mom who surprised me the most during this period. One evening in late November, she knocked on my bedroom door holding a wrapped package. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a book titled Understanding Chinese Culture and Traditions, and a beginner's Mandarin workbook. "I thought maybe, if you're going to learn about your heritage, I should learn too," she said awkwardly. "I want to understand where you come from, all of where you come from." It was such a small gesture, but it felt huge. After 18 years of denying my Chinese heritage existed, Mom was finally acknowledging it. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. "I also..." She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "I've been researching support groups for adoptive families dealing with reunion situations. I found one that meets on Thursday nights. I was wondering if maybe you'd come with me sometime." I stared at her. "You want to go to a support group?" "I want to learn how to do this right. How to support your relationship with Amy without feeling threatened. How to be the mother you need me to be in this new reality. It was the most mature thing Mom had said since this whole situation started. Okay, I said. I'll come with you. The support group met in the basement of a community center downtown. There were about 15 people there the night Mom and I attended, adoptive parents, birth parents, and adult adoptees like me. Everyone had a different story, but the themes were similar: secrets, lies, complicated emotions, and the challenge of building relationships across years of separation. One woman, whose daughter had found her through social media at age 25, talked about the guilt of missing her daughter's entire childhood. A man whose son had sought him out at 30 spoke about the challenge of building a father-son relationship with an adult. An adoptive mother whose teenage son was in reunion with his birth family talked about feeling replaced and unimportant. The hardest part, the adoptive mother said, is realizing that love isn't finite. My son having a relationship with his birth parents doesn't diminish his love for me, but it feels like it does sometimes. I looked at Mom and saw tears in her eyes. When it came time for sharing, Mom raised her hand hesitantly. I'm Donna, she said. I hid my daughter's adoption from her for 18 years. I also intercepted money and contact from her birth mother during that time. The room was very quiet. I told myself I was protecting her, Mom continued, but really I was protecting myself from having to share her. I was so afraid that if she knew about Amy, she'd choose Amy over me. But what I've learned is that I never gave Sarah the chance to choose both of us. After the meeting, Mom and I went for coffee at an all-night diner. How did that feel? I asked. Terrifying. But also, relieving? Like I finally admitted out loud what I've been carrying around for years. Are you going to keep going to the meetings? I think I need to. I have a lot to learn about how to handle this situation better. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking bad coffee and eating pie that was probably left over from the previous day. Mom, I said finally, I need you to know something. Having Amy in my life doesn't make me love you less, but hiding her from me did make me trust you less. She nodded, tears in her eyes again. I understand. And I'm going to spend however long it takes earning that trust back. Christmas was complicated that year. Amy invited me to spend Christmas Eve with her and Kevin, which was their family tradition. Mom and Dad invited me to Christmas Day dinner, which had always been our tradition. I felt pulled in multiple directions, wanting to honor both families without hurting anyone's feelings. In the end, we worked out a compromise. Christmas Eve with Amy and Kevin, Christmas morning opening presents with Mom and Dad, and Christmas dinner at our house with everyone invited. I wasn't sure how it would work, having both families together for the first time since this all began. But when Christmas Day arrived, Amy showed up with a beautiful flower arrangement and a willingness to be gracious. Mom had spent all morning cooking and cleaning, clearly nervous about hosting Amy in our home. Kevin broke the ice by complimenting Mom on the Christmas tree decorations, which led to her showing him our collection of ornaments from my childhood. Soon they were looking through photo albums together, with Kevin asking questions about my school years, and Mom sharing embarrassing stories about my various phases. Amy and Dad bonded over their mutual concern about my college choices, discussing the merits of different universities and financial aid options. Watching them work together to plan my future was surreal but wonderful. The most moving moment came when Amy pulled out a wrapped gift for Mom. You didn't need to, Mom started. I wanted to, Amy said. You've taken care of our daughter for 18 years. That deserves recognition. Inside was a beautiful photo album filled with pictures of me that Amy had somehow obtained. School photos, soccer team pictures, honor roll ceremonies. Pictures Amy had never seen but had managed to collect through what must have been considerable effort. I thought you might like to have copies, Amy said softly. Since you were there for all of these moments. Mom started crying as she flipped through the pages. How did you get these? The internet is amazing. School websites, newspaper archives, team rosters. I may have missed these moments, but I could still celebrate them from afar. It was a gesture of such generosity that it left everyone a little emotional. Here was Amy, acknowledging Mom's role in my life and celebrating it, even after everything Mom had done. Thank you, Mom whispered. This means more than you know. We're both Sarah's mothers, Amy said. We both love her. That makes us connected, whether we like it or not. By the time everyone left that evening, something had shifted. The tension that had defined our family for months had eased into something more manageable. We were still figuring out how to be a blended family across two households, but we were figuring it out together. In January, I started my second semester of senior year with a clearer sense of who I was and where I came from. I was Sarah Morrison Bell Chen, daughter of two mothers, sister to Kevin, raised by David and Donna, but born to Amy. It was complicated, but it was honest. Mom and Dad started couples counseling in February. I didn't know if their marriage would survive, but I could see them both trying to rebuild trust and communication. Mom had learned to accept my relationship with Amy, and Dad was learning to forgive 18 years of deception. It was slow work, but it was work they were both committed to. Amy used part of the restitution money to establish a small scholarship fund at my high school for students from single-parent households. She called it the Second Chances Scholarship, and I helped her write the application criteria. Sometimes families don't work out the way we planned, Amy said as we worked on the scholarship guidelines. But that doesn't mean we stop believing in the power of education and opportunity to change lives. Kevin was accepted to 3 different colleges with significant financial aid packages. Amy was so proud she couldn't stop bragging to everyone at the daycare where she worked. Watching her celebrate her son's achievements made me realize how much she'd missed not being able to brag about mine over the years. "I'm going to be insufferable when you graduate," she warned me one Tuesday over lunch. 18 years of backed-up maternal pride is going to come pouring out. "I'm looking forward to it," I said, and meant it. As graduation approached, both families came together to celebrate. Amy and Kevin sat with Mom and Dad at the ceremony, cheering embarrassingly loudly when my name was called. At the graduation party afterward, I watched Amy and Mom work together in the kitchen, preparing food and cleaning up, falling into an easy rhythm that suggested they might actually become friends someday. "Look at that," Dad said, following my gaze. 6 months ago I would never have imagined those two working together. "People can change," I said. "Yeah," he said, putting his arm around my shoulders. "They can." I started college in the fall with both sets of parents helping me move into my dorm. Amy brought homemade dumplings and a care package filled with Chinese tea and traditional herbs for when I got sick. Mom brought everything else I could possibly need, plus several things I definitely didn't need, along with enough tears to flood the parking lot. "I'm proud of you," Amy told me as we hugged goodbye. "And I'm grateful for every day we've had together since we found each other." "I'm proud of you too," I said. "For never giving up, for working so hard to send me money, for raising Kevin, for being so gracious with Mom. You're amazing." Mom's goodbye was harder, weighted with 18 years of shared history, and the knowledge that I was growing up and moving away. "I know I made mistakes," she said through her tears. "But I need you to know that every choice I made came from love, even the wrong ones." "I know," I said. "And I love you too, Mom. Both of you." "Both of us," she repeated, and for the first time, she seemed to mean it without reservation. As I watched both families drive away from my dorm, I reflected on the journey that had brought us all here. It had started with a simple question about an allowance, and had ended with a complicated but beautiful expansion of what family could mean. I thought about the support group Mom and I had attended, and the adoptive mother who'd said love wasn't finite. She was right. Learning to love Amy and Kevin didn't diminish my love for Mom and Dad. It multiplied it, creating a network of relationships that was messier and more complex than the nuclear family I'd grown up believing I belonged to, but also richer and more honest. There were still challenges ahead. Mom and Dad were still working through their marital issues, and I was still learning to navigate having two families with different traditions and expectations. But we were doing it together, with honesty instead of secrets, with inclusion instead of competition. I had learned that families can be broken and rebuilt, that trust can be lost and earned back, that love can be complicated and still be real. I had learned that sometimes the most painful truths lead to the most beautiful possibilities. And I had learned that I was exactly where I belonged, not choosing between two families, but belonging fully to both.